so much for being here today. I appreciate your presence and hope, like we say each week from this pulpit, that this congregation meets your religious, intellectual, and spiritual needs. We say that every week, right? Linda Ice said it this morning as the worship team leader. And while this may be disconcerting to you, I've often wondered how we do that. How do we meet the needs for a bunch of Unitarian Universalists? I suppose that might be a big component of what I'm charged to do here, to take care of religious, intellectual, and spiritual needs. So I do what I know to be doing. I talk a lot. I offer reflections on Sundays and at other venues. And I listen a lot. I listen to your joys and concerns and sorrows, not just on Sundays, of course, but during the course of committee meetings, by email, private meetings, which take place in homes and offices and coffee shops. But we all know, I hope, that I'm not the only one who contributes to the religious, intellectual, and spiritual needs of Westside. We all do. We all have something to offer in a variety of ways and in a variety of circumstances that contribute to the religious, intellectual, and spiritual needs of this congregation. I am no guru. I am no prophet. Yet, in some ways, I am. Just like all of you. The composer of our responsive reading this morning was Clinton Scott Lee. He was a Universalist minister, active in the 1930s and 40s and 50s. The Universalist tradition and the Unitarian tradition were both somewhat known for putting the brakes on the Second Great Awakening for those who would listen. These so-called Great Awakenings were basically religious revivals in the United States, times where the religious fervor reached a certain pitch that was difficult for the larger society to ignore. Both Unitarianism and Universalism would say, when these occasions burst upon the scene, our religious ancestors would basically say, hey, wait a minute. Let's slow down a bit. Let's not get caught up in all this zeal. Let's think about this before we get too carried away. In these great awakenings, people were looking for God. They were looking for religious leaders. They were looking for answers. And I'd like to suggest that if you look for them, they will come. People will fill the space and will provide you with answers. They will even offer to lead you to the divine. Often these individuals are not shy, but bold, and are willing to fill the vacuum of our own religious thought and practice if we want them to, if we allow them to. People sometimes go looking for prophets. They go looking for gurus. Religious people who seem to have all the things figured out, who will quickly offer to lead us if only we will follow. And there have been many people who were believed to be prophets. And this continues even today. The Hebrew Bible is full of prophets. People like Jeremiah and Isaiah and Zephaniah. People believe Jesus of Nazareth to be a prophet. And the founder of Islam, Muhammad, is still called the prophet. I also remember from one of my earliest religion classes at TCU, taught by a wonderful professor named Ambrose Edens, who told us about the legend of Simon Magus, referred to in the book of Acts in the early Christian writings. He was thought to be a prophet by some. It was believed Simon Magus could perform sorcery, that he could levitate, that he was said to be able to prophesy and forecast the future. If you were able to enjoy the medley of Broadway medleys here at Westside last Sunday, there were several pieces performed from the musical titled The Book of Mormon. The head of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, is also called the prophet, just like the founder of their church, Joseph Smith. Additionally, you may have seen in the New York Times just this past Sunday, in the business section no less, a story about Alma, the hugging saint. She is a spiritual leader and guru, a prophet. In fact, her thousands of followers believe she is a saint, and they have performed a great many humanitarian activities in her name. She tells her followers that it is action, knowledge, and devotion that are essential to a meaningful life, and that cultivating compassion, patience, forgiveness, and self-control to be of utmost importance. These are lovely words and intentions. I mean, who could really argue with that? Yet, I'm beginning to get a bit suspicious when the journalist covering Alma asks her about disagreements in her community. How does she manage those disagreements? And she told the reporter that there have never been disagreements in her community, that everybody unfailingly follows her and her pronouncements. That's what you do with the saint, right? You follow. Unquestioningly, you cease to ask questions. You perhaps even follow blindly when Alma tells you who it is you should marry. We can, if we are not careful, give up our freedom and our mind to others, to saints, to prophets, to gurus, when we are tired, when we are apathetic. But perhaps most importantly, when we have little faith in ourselves. We may have heard of the kind of prophet who makes predictions. Perhaps the Messiah has come. Maybe Jesus is coming back. Possibly the world as we know it will end. Many prophecies have been made, and they have been described as prophetic predictions. And they all of these predictions, seem to have one big thing in common. They were all wrong. But you may be glad to know it did remind me of a story where a medieval religious astrologer, a prophet, prophesied to a king that his wife would soon die. And sure enough, unfortunately, the woman died a short time later. The king was outraged at the prophet, certain that his prophecy itself had brought about his spouse's death. He summoned the astrologer and gave him this command. He said, "Prophet, tell me when you will die." The prophet realized that the king was planning to kill him immediately, no matter what answer he gave. So he said, finally, "I do not know when I will die. I only know that whenever I die, you will die 3 days later." Prophets can be very clever. So how many of you have Netflix? Yeah? I've not had it that long, but I've discovered it will suggest things for me to watch based upon other choices I've made before. And it will also tell me what is popular, what are many other people choosing to watch on Netflix. And I saw the movie titled Kumare. Have any of you seen this film? The movie poster sports an image of an Indian man, long black hair, long big beard, dark piercing eyes, and a bright orange headscarf over his head. He is, you'd agree if you saw the poster, a striking figure. Now, I'd heard of the movie before, many times on Mondays, which is my day off. I'll go to Dallas to visit one of the movie theaters, which shows films that don't always make their way to Fort Worth for some reason. And I'd seen the trailer for Kumare. I wanted to see it, but it made a relatively short run, and I was unable to make it back to Dallas in time to see it. So when I saw that it was a possibility on Netflix, I clicked on it right away. And I will warn you, if you're going to watch the movie, I'm about to spoil it for you now. It is the story of a man from India who comes to the United States in order to share his teaching. His laugh is infectious. When you hear it, you laugh when he laughs. He found his way to Arizona, where he developed a small, devoted following after speaking to several larger groups. These few will earn the attention of the guru on a much more intimate level. He will teach them yoga poses they have never before experienced. He will share with them his ideas of life and enlightenment they have never before heard. And he will meet with them on a one-on-one basis in order to learn all he can about his disciples. They, these followers, will ask him for his advice. They will listen deeply to his words. They will decide to follow wherever he leads. Kumare tells them to look for the guru within, that everything else, including himself, is an illusion. The disciples will tell him and the others in the group the powerful insights they have learned from Kumare's teaching. And they will seem to literally beam with pride and confidence. The prophet, the guru, Kumare, sort of repeats himself. He says, "No, I'm serious. Everything, including me, is not real. It is unreal. You can and should be your own guru." And they sort of say, "Yeah, we get it. Everything is an illusion. But you are the most wonderful and wisest prophet of them all." In the end, Kumare sets the date for what he calls the big reveal. And eventually, he tells them, after shaving his beard and cutting his hair, that he was born in New Jersey. The accent he used was learned from imitating his grandmother. That he tried to tell them all along that he was not real. He was not a guru. He was just like them. And that they were all gurus. But in the most poignant point of the film, he says, Kumare is the version, the vision of his best self. Now, as you might imagine, some of the followers were quite angry. They felt misled. They felt duped. Others were puzzled. Was this another wise teaching? Or was this guy really a fraud? Still others continued to believe that Kumare was a mystic with special, insightful powers. It's a fascinating film. And it reminded me of another reading in our hymnal. I don't know if you noticed it, but a couple of readings over from the responsive reading we used this morning in the hymnal is something written by Ralph Waldo Emerson. And it's titled, "A Person Will Worship Something." Did you see that? He says, a person will worship something. Have no doubt about that. We may think our tribute is paid in secret in the dark recesses of our heart, but it will out. That which dominates our imaginations and our thoughts will determine our lives and character. Therefore, it behooves us to be careful what we worship. For what we are worshiping, we are becoming. The people who followed Kumare were, by all indications, well-grounded, intelligent human beings. And several of them made major behavioral changes in their daily lives, seemingly as a result of being in the presence of Kumare. They were meditating more, exercising more, they were more thankful and undoubtedly happier with themselves and their lives because of their experience with the prophet. But was it really Kumare who made the changes? Or was it the people themselves, the individuals, the human beings who could have actually changed, even if Kumare had never come into their lives? Well, of course they could have. We have within us great untapped abilities. We can do all sorts of things if we set our mind to it, if we are motivated enough to change. Does it help sometimes to have others who inspire us, who show us a different way? I'm sure it does. But do we need to hand over to concede our personal power to another individual in order to see the light or to change our ways? I don't believe that is so. Some of the time I enjoy most each week at Westside is the time I spend here on Tuesday nights. Many of you know that on Tuesday nights, the church is off limits to those who are not involved in the self-management and recovery training, or SMART meetings. These are confidential meetings where women and men try to make sense of why they continue to do things that are not in their best interest. The person may be attempting to change their relationship with alcohol or other drugs, maybe trying to change their behavioral patterns with food or sex. They may be trying to just do something different after many years of doing the same thing. They have sought out SMART because other support groups demand they admit their own helplessness, that they submit to a power greater than themselves in order to be healed of this affliction and to go through certain steps. But these SMART individuals may very well be the most courageous people I know, because it is not easy to change. We all have experienced the difficulty of trying to change. Yet these people have acknowledged that change, though not easy, is possible, sometimes necessary, if they decide to make it so. It's not my responsibility as a facilitator of SMART meetings to make people change. I simply cannot do that. Only the individual can. They may look to me for a bit of insight, a bit of encouragement, maybe a bit of clinical knowledge, but only the individual can make the decision to do something different, no matter what I say or do. These people in SMART know that to claim their own power can be a transformational event. The need of a prophet is diminished. The need of wisdom outside of their own becomes much less important. And it does not escape me that this can be just as true within the realm of the religious or the spiritual or the intellectual. I hope that if you need it, you find your saint, your guru, your prophet. But I will suggest also that there is no guru, no prophet, no saint here at Westside. There is no one here who has all the answers. In fact, we often have more questions than answers. And yet, there is, I believe, a little bit of guru, a little bit of prophet within each and every one of us. We are wise to know that we are better together, that questions are important, and that we can all learn from one another. And yet it does no good, in my opinion, to attempt an assessment of another's religiosity or spirituality, because we will never know what goes on in the life of another, what the other must confront, how the other responds to life, what the other gives of her or himself. We can only assess our own inner workings and determine what we might do differently to be kinder, to be a gentler human being, intent on expanding the goodness we have within us all. Swami Vivekananda, a Hindu prophet, once said, "None can teach you. None can make you spiritual. There is no teacher but your own soul." Perhaps it's strange to end a reflection on false prophets with the ideas of someone who is said to fulfill that role. But all of the best prophets, as best I can tell, are not much interested in performing sorcery or predicting the future or being revered as saints. The best prophets encourage us to look within ourselves for life's answers, to share the version, the vision of our best self. And that, my friends, may very well be the most prophetic of all. As we rise together in body or spirit and join in singing our final hymn, number 86, "Blessed Spirit of My Life," we will sing every verse there is. Both.